What's up, Jaguars? Happy Friday the 13th. Don't believe anything you hear about it because it's good luck. Don't worry. So today I'm going to read Act 1, Scene 4 on pages 133 to pages 138. It's a short reading, but it's a pivotal scene in this play. We've talked about how Anne is feeling, how her father's feeling, their quarrels. We've reflected on what it would be like to be hiding. So I'm going to read this, and I'm going to hope that you can follow along at the bottom of page 133. I am going to read the opening stage actions, so pay attention here. So, it is the middle of the night, several months later. The stage is dark except for a little light which comes through the skylight in Peter's room. Everyone is in bed. Mr. and Mrs. Frank lie on the couch in the main room, which has been pulled out to serve as a makeshift double bed. Margot is sleeping on a mattress on the floor in the main room behind a curtain stretched across for privacy. The others are all in their accustomed rooms. From outside, we hear two drunken soldiers singing Lily Marlene. A girl's high giggle is heard. The sound of running feet is heard coming closer and then fading in the distance. Throughout the scene, there is the distant sound of airplanes passing overhead. A match suddenly flares up in the attic. We dimly see Mr. Van Dam. He is getting his bearings. He quickly comes down the stairs and goes to the cupboard where the food is stored. Again, the match flares up and is as quickly blown out. The dim figure is seen to steal back up the stairs. There is a quiet for a second or two, broken only by the sound of airplanes and running feet on the street below. Suddenly, out of the silence in the dark, we hear Anne scream, "No, no, don't take me!" "Shh, Anne, for God's sake, shush! Save me, save me!" She screams and screams. Dussel gets out of bed, going over to her, trying to wake her. "For God's sake, quiet, quiet! You want someone to hear?" In the main room, Mrs. Frank grabs a shawl and pulls it around her. She rushes into Anne, taking her in her arms. Mr. Frank hurriedly gets up, putting on his overcoat. Margot sits up, terrified. Peter's light goes out in his room. Mrs. Frank. "Hush, darling, hush. It's all right, it's all right." To Dussel. "Will you be kind enough to turn on the light, Mr. Dussel?" Back to Anne. "It's nothing, my darling. It's just a dream." Dussel turns on the light in the bedroom. Mrs. Frank holds Anne in her arms. Gradually, Anne comes out of her nightmare, still trembling with horror. Mr. Frank comes into the room and goes quickly to the window, looking out to be sure that no one outside has heard Anne's screams. Mrs. Frank holds Anne, talking softly to her. In the main room, Margot stands on a chair, turning on the center hanging lamp. A light goes on in the Van Dam's room overhead. Peter puts his robe on, coming out of his room. Dussel to Mrs. Frank. "Something must be done about that child, Mrs. Frank, yelling like that. Who knows but there's somebody's out on the streets. She's endangering all our lives." Mrs. Frank. "Anne, darling." Dussel. "Every night she twists and turns. I don't sleep. I spend half my night shushing her, and now it's nightmares." Margot comes to the door of Anne's room, followed by Peter. Mr. Frank goes to them, indicating that everything is all right. Peter takes Margot back. Mrs. Frank to Anne. "You're here, safe, you see. Nothing has happened. To Dussel. "Please, Mr. Dussel, go back to bed. She'll be herself in a minute or two. Won't you, Anne?" Dussel. "Thank you, but I'm going to the WC, the one place where there's peace." WC stands for water closet or bathroom. He stalks out. Mr. Van Dam, in underwear and trousers, comes down the stairs. Mr. Van Dam. "What is it? What happened?" Dussel. "A nightmare. She was having a nightmare." Mr. Van Dam. "I thought someone was murdering her." Dussel. "Unfortunately, no." He goes into the bathroom. Mr. Van Dam goes back up the stairs. Mr. Frank, in the main room, sends Peter back to his own bedroom. Mr. Frank. "Thank you, Peter. Go back to bed." Peter goes back to his room. Mr. Frank follows him, turning out the light and looking out the window. Then he goes back to the main room and gets up on a chair, turning out the center hanging lamp. Mrs. Frank to Anne. "Would you like some water?" "Was it a very bad dream?" "Perhaps if you told me, Anne. I'd rather not talk about it." Mrs. Frank. "Poor darling. Try to sleep then. I'll sit right here beside you until you fall asleep." "You don't have to." "But I'd like to stay with you very much." "I'd rather you didn't." "Good night, then." She leans down to kiss Anne. Anne throws her arm up over her face, turning away. "You'll be all right. There's nothing that you want?" Anne. Will you please ask Father to come?" Mrs. Frank. "Of course, Anne dear." Mr. Frank. "Edith, liebe Schau," which means dear, look. Mrs. Frank. Es macht nix. Ich danke dem lieben Ergat, dass Sie Schitzwangensteins. I'm not going to read all this German. Basically what she's saying, it's all right. I thank dear God that at least she turns to you when she needs comfort. Go in, Otto. She is hysterical because of fear. Margot. It's a phase. You heard, Father. Most girls go through it. They turn to their fathers at this age. They give all their love to their fathers. Mrs. Frank. You weren't like this. You didn't shut me out. Margot. She'll get over it. Anne. Oh, Pim, I dreamed they came to get us. The Green Police. They broke down the door and grabbed me and started to drag me out the way they did Jopie. I want you to take this pill. What is it? Something to quiet you. She takes it and drinks the water. In the main room, Margot turns out the light and goes back to her bed. Mr. Frank, do you want me to read to you for a while? Anne. No, just sit with me for a minute. Was I awful? Did I yell terribly loud? Do you think anyone outside could have heard? Mr. Frank. No, lie quietly now and try to sleep. Anne. I'm a terrible coward. I'm so disappointed in myself. I think I've conquered my fear. I think I'm really grown up, and then something happens, and I run to you like a baby. I love you, Father. I don't love anyone but you. Mr. Frank. Annala. It's true. I've been thinking about it for a long time. You're the only one I love. It's fine to hear you tell me that you love me, but I'd be happier if you said you loved your mother as well. She needs your help so much, your love. Anne. We have nothing in common. She doesn't understand me. Whenever I try to explain my views on life to her, she asks me if I'm constipated. Mr. Frank. You hurt her very much just now. She's crying. She's in there crying. Anne. I can't help it. I only told the truth. I don't want her here. Then with a sudden change. Oh, Pim, I was horrible, wasn't I? And the worst of it is, I can't stand off and look at myself doing it and know it's cruel, and yet I can't stop doing it. What's the matter with me? Tell me. Don't just say it's just a phase. Help me. Mr. Frank. There is so little that we parents can do to help our children. We can only try to set a good example. Point the way. The rest of you must do yourself. You must build your own character. And I'm trying, really I am. Every night I think back over all the things I did that day that were wrong, like putting the wet mop in Mr. Dussel's bed. And this thing, now with Mother, I say to myself that was wrong. I make up my mind I'm never going to do that again. Never. Of course I may do something worse, but at least I'll never do that again. I have a nicer side, Father, a sweeter, nicer side, but I'm scared to show it. I'm afraid that people are going to laugh at me if I'm serious. So the mean Anne comes to the outside and the good Anne stays on the inside, and I keep on trying to switch them around and have the good Anne outside and the bad Anne inside, and be like what I'd like to be and might be if only she's asleep. Mr. Frank watches her for a moment and then turns out the light. Now we get a reading from Anne's journal, the diary. The air raids are getting worse. They come over day and night. The noise is terrifying. Pim says it should be music to our ears. The more planes, the sooner we'll come into this war. Mrs. Van Dans pretends to be a fatalist. What will be, will be. But when the planes come over, who is the most frightened? No one else but Petronella. Monday, the 9th of November, 1942. Wonderful news! The Allies have landed in Africa. Pim says that we can look for an early finish to the war. Just for fun, he asked each of us what was the first thing we wanted to do when we got out of here. Mrs. Van Daan longs to be home with her things, her needlepoint chairs, the Bechstein piano her father gave her, the best the money can buy. Peter would like to go to a movie. Mr. Dussel wants to go back to his dentistry. He's afraid he is losing his touch. For myself, there are so many things. To ride a bike again, to laugh till my belly hurts, to have new clothes from the skin out, to have a hot tub filled to overflowing and wallow in it for hours, to be back in school with my friends. Okay, so there is scene 4 of Act 1. What I'm looking for you guys to get, and what I'm looking for is I want you to compare and contrast. I want you to think about what we are going through with coronavirus, with COVID-19, how we're not in school right now, how some things have been taken away from us. And then I want you to write just a couple sentences, 4 or 5 sentences, about how similar is what Anne is going through here in scene 4, similar to what some of us might be experiencing with COVID-19, like with the quarantine, with the shutdown, with all the things that we've been going through. What are some comparisons that can be drawn? Like, what similar things do you feel that Anne might be feeling here? So I look forward to seeing what you guys have to write. I hope you guys have a great week and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.